What's up, everyone? DelVecchio here from websiteprofitcourse.com. Today's tutorial is going to be one of my favorite to date because in a really short period, we're going to cover a little bit of PHP, HTML, and CSS, and we'll create a custom WordPress shortcode that you see right here. And what this is going to do is display a block of text to make it look like an iPhone text message. So here's what it's going to look like when we're done. So you can see how we recreated that look. And this is my favorite way to learn. I never took a boot camp or class for any of these programming languages or WordPress development. I just was really interested in how all this stuff worked and figured it out over time through these little projects. I think it's better to work on things like that are driven by your own ideas versus taking a boot camp just to add a skill to your resume. We'll get this done through the functions.php file within your theme directory. And if you're a developer, I'm sure you're familiar with this, whereas if you're a beginner, you probably are thinking, what is that? So whichever you are, let's get started on this project. I'm here on a WordPress posts page, and this is where we'll begin. And the first thing that I like to do when I'm creating a shortcode is start with the HTML, the plain HTML, and then once I get the HTML and the CSS working together, that's when I can turn that into PHP code and then build a few options into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a custom HTML block here, and I'll paste in the HTML code. And all this is just a div, and I give it the class imsg for iMessage, and then I have a second class here called first. So this is going to designate the person that is sending the first message, and I'm going to have a second class called reply. So this is either going to be first or reply, and that's what's going to determine whether it's going to be blue or gray. So, I mean, this is really simple code here. Let me save this. I'm going to add the custom CSS over here in the appearance customize section. So I normally do this from the child themes style.css file, but there's usually 2 or 3 places where you can add custom CSS. So let me paste this in. I'm not going to go through it right now. I'll do that at the end. But let me click on additional CSS and paste this in. And you can see how it gives us that style. Like I said, I'll step through some of these CSS styles at the end of this. I'll publish the custom CSS code, and then we'll move on to start building the shortcode. Now, most of the time when I do custom code like this, I'll just search for other people that are using similar functions or trying to accomplish a similar goal, and I'll find their skeleton code that's already working. And in the process of doing that, today I found a website that does this for you with shortcodes. It's called generatewp.com/shortcodes, and you fill in your details through these steps here, and this is where it's going to build out your PHP code that you have to add to the functions.php file. So once we get our skeleton code from here, we can start coding on our WordPress site and build this function in. So I'm going to start here on the shortcode tab, and the first thing that we fill out is the shortcode name that we're going to use. Just like the class, I'm going to call it imsg. For the function name, you can just append underscore shortcode to it, so that's what I'll do here. I'll just replace custom with imsg. And for this, they give you the 2 examples of self-closing and enclosing shortcode. So we want to have this enclosing shortcode because the content, that's basically the text message. So I'm going to select enclosing from this, and you can build options into this code. So the only option that I'm going to build in is whether it's a reply or not. So if it's a reply, it's going to be gray, and if it's not a reply, then it'll be blue. So we will have one attribute. So let's move on to the next tab here. We can define our attributes. I'll just call this reply, all lowercase, and the first attribute default value is going to be set to false. So essentially, if within this shortcode we have the option reply equals true, then that's how we can set it to our reply style. So I think that's all I got to fill out on here. I'm going to update this code, and we're going to grab our skeleton code that we can work with, paste this into our functions.php file. So let me go back here, and you can access the functions.php file from appearance editor. and it's right here. I think it's normally just directly under the style.css at all times. So if we scroll down to the bottom, we will be able to add our custom code. So I'm just going to paste this in. Now, one quick note is that if you want to read up more on how this all works, WordPress does have a page within their codex section. So if you just Google search for WordPress Shortcode API, you'll get this page here. And it describes some of the options that we're going to zip through in here. I'm not going to give you a full-length explanation of how everything works. Just know that this is where you might want to go if you need to search for something, but you don't know what to search for. Might give you a little more clarity. So to quickly roll through this, what this does is it provides a function for us to add a shortcode. So this is our custom function right here. And then we use this WordPress function add shortcode to attach it to the WordPress system so that we can use it within the posts and the pages. And then there's two arguments that this function accepts. The first are the attributes. So these are the options that we're going to define within the shortcode. And the second is the content. So this is what the shortcode is wrapped around. This is going to be our text message. And then down here, the first thing that we do is we define our default values. So if for some reason this reply value is not set within the shortcode, it's just going to default to false. And if we want to manually change that to true, we have to do that within the shortcode. I may not be the best at explaining this. If any developers come across this video and have anything to add, by all means leave a comment, because code is something that I understand well, but I might not explain it that well. But I do my best, and I wanted to present this to you just because I think it's a really cool example. So what we need to add on to this is a little bit of logic. Like I said, we have to check this reply option, figure out what to do based on that reply option, and then we have to return our custom code. Checking this reply option is only going to take us one line of code, and I normally like to comment each section. So this is with 2 forward slashes. That's what's going to start a comment line. You just want to put something descriptive in here, because if you do this and then 2 months later or 3 months later come back to it, there's a good chance you're going to forget how it works. So I just put in here check if reply and assign the HTML class attribute. And I'm going to start here with a variable that is started with the $sign here in PHP. I'm going to call it MSG type, and this variable is really just going to hold the string of the class that we're going to add to the div. I'm going to do this by doing a one-line if-else, and the framework of this is you put a conditional statement, you can put that in parentheses, and then we have the question mark, and if the conditional statement passes and it's true, then we assign this first value here, and then we put a colon, and if it's false, we assign the second value. And I'm just building out the skeleton code for this line. So let's start with the conditional statement. And I'm going to use a function here. This is something that I can't explain all that well. I think all it does is removes links from a string of text. But I remember checking this, and this was used on a couple of people's shortcode functions, so I kind of just copied and pasted it and used it for my own. It's ESC_ATTR. And then within this function, we're putting our attributes array. And in order to get the value for the reply option, we put these square brackets and then single quotes and type in reply for that. And that's going to give us the value. So this is either going to be false if it's default, or it's going to be whatever we define it as within the shortcode. And what I'm looking for is true. I want to check to see if this is true. We do 2 equal signs. And I'm looking for the string true, so we're going to surround that true by quotes. I could probably discuss the ways to do comparisons and logic within PHP, but just to keep this video short, I'll leave that out and let you figure that out on your own. You got to have some homework here. And we'll move on to these 2 values. So if this is true, if we have the reply option set to true, then we're going to add the class reply. And if it's not true, then we're going to add the class first. So this line should be done, and we have one more line. We're going to return our value. So I'm sure if you know code at all, you're familiar with the return function. And really, this is just going to be a string. We're going to return a string of code, and we're going to place our variables within that. So I'm going to copy the pure HTML code that we had before, and I'm going to replace this class right here with our variable. So to break this string, I need to add 2 single quotes. So this is something that's kind of important with strings with PHP. The opening string here is opened by the single quote, and when we're typing our HTML, if we need to add a quote in that, we use the opposite double quote. So that is something that can be really confusing, or it could be a cause for an error if you're doing PHP code. I've had that happen before. So I'm going to put in the 2 quotes to break this up, and to do string concatenation with PHP, you use the period operator. So basically I'm just going to add this period. We're going to concatenate the first part of the string with our variable MSG type, and then the second dot to concatenate the other part of the string. And then obviously we have to get rid of the hard-coded message in here and put our content in. And we do that the same exact way. I'll do the 2 single quotes to break it up, add our spaces in here. I'll add my 2 periods. This is kind of like the way that I write code. Instead of doing it straight left to right, I kind of build out a skeleton code with nothing and then fill it in just to make sure that all the syntax is correct. And there is our variable. I believe that this is all we need to get this working. Let me give it a shot. Hopefully we're good to go. Let me save it. And I'll go over to the post where I have this pure HTML code right now, and we'll replace that with the shortcode. So let me just actually copy and paste this. I'll remove this block. We'll add a shortcode block. I'm going to paste this in, and you'll just see how I'll replace the HTML with the shortcode. And the same thing with the ending tag here. I'll replace that with the ending shortcode tag. And because we don't have an option set in here, this is going to be blue colored, or at least it should be. So let's update this post. Take a look, and if all goes well, we'll have our iPhone style. And it doesn't look like we have this correct. So let me see if I can debug this really quickly. You know, nothing goes perfect in here. Let me bring the console into the same window, and let's see if I can figure it out. And immediately, as soon as I look at this, I could tell there's just no space in between the classes. So I just forgot to add that space in there. So I think if I add that in, yeah, we're good to go. So I just made that mistake on the back end. Let me fix that really quick, and then I'll go back to the post page. Let's add one reply here so we get to see both of them in action, and you can see how the options work. So I'll copy this and add another shortcode element, another block here. Let me paste that in, and I'm going to put in a longer message after I fill out the option here. So all I have to do is just put in reply equals true with 2 quotes, double quotes around this string. And then let me paste in a longer text. Save the page. Let's take a look. We'll refresh over here. And there you have it. As promised, let me quickly go into the CSS. I'll step through that without going really in depth with the syntax of that. I'll just explain the different styles that I applied. So I just need to jump into the section here. And there's basically 3 parts to this. So the first is CSS properties that are applied to either of these. So we start by applying the position relative, and that's because we do absolute positioning with a sub element. Change the font size, make sure that the font family is set to a sans font, a sans serif font. I adjust the line height, the border radius, and the padding. So those are the things that apply to both of the blue and the gray elements. And then this is another thing that I had to look this up and kind of play around with it. I couldn't explain to you exactly how I got this to look the way it does, but the arrow here on the left for the gray one and up here on the right for the blue one, this is done by using CSS and by using the before tag or property. I don't know the correct terminology for that, but that's absolutely positioned. We have a height of 0 and a width of 0, and there's no content on this. And the color that you see is generated through a border. So then here is the code for our first message. This is what's setting the background to blue, the font color to white, and the custom margin is what kind of offsets it to the right. And this is how we do the blue arrow. It's a border top, a border bottom, and a border left. Two of them are transparent, and then for the other border value, there's nothing. I can't describe to you how this works or why it does. I had to play around with these numbers to get it to look like this. And then we do those same things, we just apply different values to the reply element as opposed to the first element. So that's really all there is to the CSS code. And I'll include a link in the description below where you can download all the code for this so you can just copy and paste it. Hopefully you found this video valuable. I know when I first learned about how to do custom shortcodes, it was like a mind-blowing thing, especially since I was really into code. Anytime I find out how to do something with code and WordPress, I generally go the manual route, and it might take me like 3 or 4 times longer than if I looked for a plugin or something. But I always learn a lot more that way. Progress for me has not always been that fast, but almost all of my progress has been driven by my own curiosity. Now, if you have a lot of these skills and you're good at building websites, you're good at working with WordPress, but maybe you want to start freelancing and making money with those skills, you should check out my site, websiteprofitcourse.com. I'll include a link to that as well in the description below. And from there, you can download the 15 tools to start your web design business. That'll give you a behind-the-scenes look at the ones that I use pretty much every day. Many of them just make the process of creating a website really easy, especially if you're not too design-oriented, if you're more of a coder kind of person. I was really bad with design for a while, and these tools really helped me out. But overall, I've found the most success by working with local clients. There's so many small businesses out there that have just a really bad web presence, and they need your help. But the bottom line is, they don't hire web developers left and right. They're not very in tune with the online world. It takes a little bit of time to build trust with them, and that's really why I recommend the local aspect, because there's no better way to build trust than being close to somebody where you can actually talk to them over the phone or even meet in person if you need to. Last but not least, if you learned something from this video, I'd love it if you gave it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I got more videos like this planned, along with webinar type presentations that'll teach you more on the business and the marketing side of things. That's all I got for you guys today. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you on the next video. Thanks a lot.